Hi, I'm Eve Summer, and I'm the stage director for LIZBETH. How does it feel to be back at Opera Orlando after a few years? It feels amazing. I was so involved in prep for the show and work that I forgot to get excited about being in Orlando until I stepped out of the airport yesterday and got hit with the heat and the palm trees, and I got really excited all over again. I had an amazing time here for Tales of Hoffman in 2018, and now I'm even more pumped than I was to be back. How do I think this production of LIZBETH holds its own against the standard repertory? Well, what I would really like to do is sort of turn that question on its head. I think a lot of the time we take new work and we sort of try and come up with a talking point or a similar piece where we say, well, this is as good as, or we make a comparison between a modern piece and a piece from the inherited repertoire. And I think it's sort of an impossible position to put an opera lover in. When there's a piece in the repertoire that you've been living with for your whole life and that the industry and society have been living with for their whole lives, to say, here's something you've never heard before, it's just going to mean the same to you as that. It's not really a fair test. I've seen The Marriage of Figaro and listened to it thousands of times, and there isn't something that you can say, oh, this will replace that, or this is the same as that. I think rather I would say that this is a really cool piece and it's going to be a really cool production, and we must move forward as an art form, hearing new pieces, experiencing new theater, and rather than make a comparison between something in the inherited or the standard repertoire and this piece, say, come and experience it, and if you like it, awesome. Maybe you'll get to experience it again in a different production. And that's how we keep the art form moving forward, not by sort of comparing and trying to replace the pieces in our repertoire with new pieces, but just by adding different words to the rep. How do I prepare? What steps do I take to prepare to direct a show? So I have a series of sort of more technical things that I do, like breaking the piece down into character and scene breakdowns, making prop lists, making schedules, and each time I go through one of those steps that sort of sets me up for sitting with my score to do the creative work, I also take an impression of the piece that I make a note of. So in doing all of the sort of like by rote quotidian things to get myself ready to just sit in front of it and create, I notice patterns that arise in the way that I talk about certain characters or certain parts of the piece. And then at some point it occurs to me that I keep using the same vocabulary to describe certain moments or certain people, and almost like a trajectory identifies itself to me. It's quite instinctual and not, something that I can always put my finger on, but it always happens. I think a big part of directing for me is trusting my instincts. And so it's sort of a combination of doing all of the bits of paperwork that keep me coming back at regular intervals to the piece while I'm working on other productions, and keeping the piece in my mind, and then taking note of those things as I start to develop not just a perspective about the piece, but a perspective about this particular production in the moment. One of the other things that I do every time I have a new production to prepare for is that I spend a lot of time. First, I do like a cursory, listen to the music if there are recordings of the piece, read the libretto, sit with the score one time through. Um, and then I tend to spend a good deal of time on source material, research, dramaturgy. So, for example, for this production of LIZBETH, there's a ton of historical information about the Lizzie Borden case, about her life. I took a guided historical tour of the Borden house and asked about a bajillion questions of the historical tour guide. I take a million notes, and I then think about all of that as it relates to the piece. And then the most important thing that I do after that is I try and not forget it, but put it aside, so that I can let go of all of the nitty gritty historical research, and then let that sit in sort of a back file of my mind while I move forward to let the music tell me whatever it wants to say, and not feel too married to each bit of that research. I keep it close if I need it, but a big part of the process for me after having done all that work is to not get too attached to it, to let it go so that I can go with my instinct for movement, for character development, and for music most of all, and to not feel locked in just because an interesting piece of research sort of got in my head. I have been directing a lot of comedies lately, so am I happy to have a bit of a change of pace? Yes, I definitely am. I think it's awesome to flex different muscles. It's sort of easy when you do a lot of the same type of show, if it's the same period, or the same style, or the same comic style, to start getting into routine, relying on certain staging conventions or bits that you might have done that have worked really well before. And so I love breaking that up on both sides of the coin. I do love comedy, but it's really, really fun to get into something that's deep. How do I approach comedy and drama? Honestly, I approach them in the same way. I have the way I describe my directing style is character-based. So for me, no matter what type of piece I'm doing, I'm interested in honesty and the motivation behind each word, each note, each decision that a character makes. So that means when I do a comedy, I am very much a situational comedy as opposed to a farce type of director. I don't really, stylistically, I do much more situational comedy. So my comedies tend to have a lot of quite truthful, dramatic moments in them whenever I can find them. And in that same vein, when I do something that's more dramatic or tragic, I'm never looking to sort of make an overarching statement about about some greater motive on top of that piece. That I'm really looking to see where and why the choices that each character make drives the story in the direction that it finds its way down. So in that vein, I also often have moments of just breaking and levity in a lot of my more dramatic or tragic productions that I direct. So for me, no matter what, at any moment of any scene, I'm asking, why would a person do what they do? How would they feel that took them to the point that they would open their mouth and say the next thing they're about to say? And whether it's funny, whether it's a joke, a one-liner, whether it's, you know, a big reveal of like a very horrible crime or whatever it is, it's coming from something that's very human, something that's sort of been pushed out of them by the need to open their mouth and say something, and in opera to open their mouth and sing. So in that regard, I really think that my sort of character-based as opposed to stylized or textual or even musical first approach always takes us in the room coming in the same direction towards what a character's intentions are. What am I most looking forward to with this production? The singers in the room. I'm really, really excited to hear what each of the singers has brought during their preparation to the musical interpretation of these roles, to see where we're going to start from. With a lot of the standard repertoire, every singer is going to have their own interpretation, but I think there's often a general understanding sort of in our collective cultural consciousness about what, about the story, about what direction the characters can go, and we have a different kind of blank slate here that I'm really, really excited just to meet all of the singers and hear where their sort of personal study has taken them before we combine all of our ideas. What is my favorite part about directing in modern opera? I think walking into the room with a great deal of open-mindedness coming at me from all sides. It's really exciting to get as a collaborative team with each separate artist involved, and then as a collaborative room, and then a collaborative production to get to see where the process takes us. In the opera industry, we tend to be very proprietary about our stories and our characters. We talk about characters like they're real, even when it's not a historical drama. We'll say, you know, Violetta would never do that, or the Countess always acts like this, and we sort of set up all of our characters with all of these expectations built up on them. But working on a new piece or a modern piece, even that isn't necessarily premiere, but that hasn't been done for hundreds of years, we sort of get to think just fresh about it. And when there's a room full of people thinking fresh about it, it's very, very exciting. And I love to not feel like we are having to measure ourselves against any other artists, any other productions. We just all get to create. What do I like about this being a psychological thriller? I like that I don't know all of the answers, yet I have a lot of my own ideas and theories, but I also know that the artists who are all coming to the room will have their own ideas and theories. And there's something about being able to incorporate those without having all the answers yet that is very exciting. The spontaneity of that is quite exciting. So yeah, I'm excited to see just how psychologically thrilling we can make it. Get your tickets at operaorlando.org for Lizbeth, May 20th and 22nd at Harriet's Orlando Ballet Center.